Well, hey there, hi there, ho there, Canada. I'm Faith Goldy. Welcome to episode 1, the premiere of On the Hunt, with yours truly here on TheRebel.media. Now, before we kick things off, I thought this would be a good time to share a bit about who I am and where I'm coming from. Some of y'all out there might remember me from the good old days at Sun News, and so you might know a bit about my beats. God, guns, foreign policy, a total lack of tolerance for PCBS might be just some of the motifs that come to mind. But I want to set the record straight about a few other things right out of the gates. I am not a Tory shill or a so-called robot. I was not raised in a partisan household and was, for the better part of my life, a CNE, Christmas and Easter Christian. It might come as a surprise to most, but I was once a pro-choice, peacekeeping-obsessed, poncho-wearing lefty. See, I was raised in a household where freedom of thought reigned supreme. I was always a political animal, but my mother, well, she never told me exactly which way she voted outright. She simply asked me constructive questions and encouraged me to value and reflect on my life's experience and my studies as well. And so, thanks to a host of factors like educational systems at every level, pop culture, mainstream media, and Western water cooler conversations, I found my ideological home to the fairly far left of center. It wasn't until my 17th birthday, when the topic of abortion was brought up at the dinner table, that my mother hinted that she was pro-life. "Wait," I said, "you're pro-life?" My mom nodded. "Yeah," I quipped. "Next you're going to tell me that you vote conservative." "All my life," she said calmly. At that moment, I excused myself from the table, proceeded to the bathroom, stared in the mirror, and began to weep. I found myself in utter existential crisis, literally. How could my mom, my hero, my role model, my best friend, and my confidant be a member of the enemy tribe, a conservative? And so began what I can only describe as a Copernican turn in my life, a 180. That was the day that I began viewing conservatives as, well, humans, truly. See, up until that point, the left, in their monopoly of media and education and pop culture, they had done such a bang-up job in my wee teenage brain and had successfully dehumanized folks who identify as right of center. They were robots, trained seals who would chant empty, antiquated slogans because of, dead dogma or intellectual constipation. Within a year, I was off to university with my new conservatives are people too perspective. And so began my transition. See, my first year of uni was at a predominantly Jewish campus at a Canadian university. There were a lot of bright kids my age, though still in the small minority, who had proper formation in important topics, from the economy all the way to ethics. As soon as I stopped viewing their arguments as sheepish bleats, instead listening to the merits of their theses, it became impossible to deny. Their arguments were stronger than mine. I still researched in hopes of substantiating my previous worldview, but alas, time after time, it was to no avail. Now, in today's universities, less than 1 decade later, the student in my position is not encouraged to partake in inquisitive adventures which could feasibly lead them away from any one of the left's sacred cows. Instead, they're encouraged to dig their heels in the ground, plunge their fingers into their ears, and most importantly, to villainize those who dare to question their ideology. Pick a term, invent a cause, use a hashtag. Just make sure it's based in identity politics, one's creed, one's color, or one's private parts. Then sprinkle that simple-minded phobia suffix to your so-called retort, and presto, your path to a liberal arts degree is all but done. But hey, the mid-2000s were simpler times when capital T, truth, still had a shot on campuses. Speaking of truth, that is what we're on the hunt for here, truth. Established truths that are under attack by the twin poisons of political correctness and censorship, and underlying truths hidden behind a veil of misinformation, manipulation, mainstream media, and minority tyranny. My daily prayer is from the book of Isaiah. "Here I am, Lord, send me." Some days are beautiful, others, well, they're battles. Each is a blessing. And so I hope you'll join me for this new part of the journey. Do you not have an answer for them, Justin? There is no left and right on this one. There is, however, right and wrong. Without further ado, here are the week's top headlines that we're tracking for you. In international news, this just in: Britain is no longer a Christian country and should stop acting like it is. That, according to a top-level inquiry into the place of religion in society. Citing the decline of church-going and the rise of Islam, the report calls for public life in Britain to be systematically de-Christianized. Perhaps most controversially, the report calls for a rethink of anti-terror policy, including a provision so that students can voice radical views on campus without fear of being reported to security services. Unless, of course, those views include climate skepticism or Euroscepticism, because remember, kids, safe spaces aren't for just anybody. And France's far-right Front National pulled off an historic win in this week's regional elections. Boosted by fears over Islamic State attacks, record unemployment, and immigration, Marine Le Pen's party secured 29% of the vote nationally, the highest score ever for the anti-Europe, anti-immigration party, which came first in 6 regions out of 13. Le Pen's win has reminded Europe that the only thing more dangerous to her security than the Islamic State is a chatty politician rather like Nigel Farage in a blonde wig. Meantime, Moscow says that it will sue Ukraine if it does not pay service on its $3 billion loan. After prolonged economic sanctions and plummeting oil prices, Russia says it desperately needs the money to continue pouring arms and fighters into its illegally occupied territories of eastern Ukraine. And Iran is defying the rules of the world again, testing a new medium-range ballistic missile capable of carrying, you guessed it, a nuclear warhead. The move is in direct violation of 2 UN Security Council resolutions, but President Barack Obama is urging everyone to just chill out, as the missile test will not derail his nuke deal with a rogue state. And in the U.S. this week, intelligence officials say the Islamic fundamentalists are exploring the use of America's refugee program to enter the country. But don't worry, Canada. I'm sure none of them have heard about our promise to bring in 10,000 migrants by January or the 35,000 by March either. And Hillary Clinton says the phrase radical Islam has a connotation that the U.S. is at war with a religion in defense of her refusal to use the term. The Democratic presidential candidate said, however, if we can find a way to work YouTube video into this war's nomenclatura, well, she's totally down. And closer to home, NDP leader Thomas Mulcair is calling for Donald Trump to be barred from Canada after the GOP candidate proposed Muslims be barred from entering the U.S. Meantime, city councillors in both Vancouver and Toronto are calling on the owners of the towers bearing Trump's name to remove his brand. It should be noticed the above parties have reserved comment on the No Infidels Allowed policy in Toronto's Ahmadiyya abode, which turned away a young disabled man from public housing because, well, he isn't a Muslim. And the Ontario government says it has no idea what's being taught to kids in private elementary schools. A Mississauga school affiliated with the school in Pakistan, once attended by the California terrorist Tashfeen Malik, has become the focus of public attention in the wake of the San Bernardino massacre. Ontario's Education Minister Liz Sandals refused to discuss specifics about the school when pressed by reporters this week, but will be happy to answer any of the questions you might have about the sex ed for your 6-year-old. The safety of your children is, after all, their priority. And reports of Canadians across the country in a state of shock this week as Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau can't confirm that Trudeau's Liberals will keep to their promise not to exceed a $10 billion deficit. This is the Fed's hike taxes on high-income earners by a whopping 4 percentage points next year, conceding the move won't actually raise as much revenue as they had initially planned. Stay with us. One group has Ontario's nanny state in their sights, and they're prepared to fight for their rights. That's after this short break. Ontario residents' right to vape is going up in smoke. The use of electronic cigarettes is under fire thanks to Liberal government's passage of Bill 45. Let's take a look at the story specs in Ontario's vape fight. Tobacco presently claims 13,000 lives in Ontario each year, shy of 40 people every day. Tobacco-related disease costs Ontarians an estimated $7.5 billion each year between direct and indirect costs. And according to Public Health England, e-cigarettes are 95% less harmful than smoking tobacco. Meanwhile, here in Canada, 76% of those who used to smoke but no longer do have e-cigarettes to thank. However, Bill 45 bans e-cigarettes anywhere smoking is prohibited and stores from demonstrating how to use them. Now, Kathleen Wynne and her Deputy Health Minister seem to be flip-flopping. But one man wants to see that new law vaporized. MPP Randy Hillier, better known as a vape dad, he was the sole member of the legislature to vote against the bill and has proven to have the juice needed to take our nanny state to task. He joins us now in studio. Really good to have you here, Randy.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, before I get you to walk us through where we are right now, I have to ask you on behalf of so many Canadians wondering, where the heck did vape dad come from?
I'm not really sure, but when I spoke to the bill originally, Bill 45, part of what I said was one of the big advantages of personal vaporizers was the ability for mothers and fathers, grandparents, to be able to spend more time with their kids and their grandkids. Because, smoking, you have to leave, you have to go outside, you have to be away from your kids to save them from the harm of tobacco. And vaporizers allow families to stay together. And I think that was some of the genesis. I didn't start that. Some people in the vaping community came up with these T-shirts and the Vape Dad hashtag last week.
I love it, and it's taken off. It's got its own like Reddit thread and stuff like that. No, it's totally awesome. I'll be honest, full disclosure, I vape. I've got my e-cig right over here. I used to smoke a pack a day. I eventually quit. I've kind of relapsed a little bit now, but I'm nowhere near to where I was because of this e-cigarette. My sister's quit. So many people around me have additional years to their lives. I know that because of this. I was reading through the bill, and for folks who are interested at home, Schedule 3 that pertains to us in the vaping community, where are we now?
Well, we're all very confused right at the moment. The regulations that would have prevented people from vaping in public places was to take effect January 1st. One of the things that we've seen the Associate Minister and the Premier both contradict each other in the last couple of weeks. They both said that they have to go back to the drawing boards and try to get this right. But there's an essential element here. We know that the way Bill 45 sits today, where it deems personal vaporizers or electronic nicotine delivery systems as a tobacco product, and anything else, any personal vaporizer with any product is deemed to be a tobacco product. And this is where the conundrum has happened, one of the big conundrums. The Supreme Court has ruled that harm reduction is guaranteed under the Charter. People must be allowed to reduce the harm to themselves, whether it be medicinal marijuana, whether it be injection sites, whatever it is. Governments can't arbitrarily prevent people from reducing harm to themselves. That's where the conundrum is. The way Bill 45 is right now, it is unconstitutional. It will be challenged. It will be defeated. And whether it's marijuana in a vaporizer or the bill becomes unenforceable. The law becomes impossible to proceed with in any practical manner. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but they've tied themselves up in such a Gordian knot of misrepresentations, myths and falsehoods, and for them to untangle this mess is going to be tricky.
Well, I can't wait for it to be struck down. I can't wait for it to be proven for what it is, which is unconstitutional. As far as I'm concerned, this is not rooted in a stitch of evidence-based policy. Randy, folks at home, they want to get involved. What can they do?
Listen, there's many vape advocacy sites on Facebook. There's vape hashtags. We have a vibrant community. Most of the vape shops throughout Ontario, anyway, and I would think elsewhere through the country, because vaping is under attack from all provinces. Most of the vape shops have their own advocacy networks as well. So next time you need to get some juice, go to a vape shop, tell them that you want to be involved, go on Facebook, go on Twitter, and listen, make yourself heard, make yourself known that you want to be able to have a more enjoyable life, have less harm, and recognize that nicotine addiction is a powerful and strong addiction, and if we can wean ourselves off that and have a better life, then government can't be permitted to prevent us from having a better life.
I love what you're doing. I love that you're here right now. Thanks so much, Vape Dad, for being our very first guest here on The Hunt.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, folks, you want to stay right there. Christian censorship in our own backyard. That's up next as we hop on the culture war machine. We'll be right back.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Are some religions more equal than others? When it comes to Christian praise and worship in the city of Toronto, that would seem to be the case. Let's take a look at the story specs in Toronto's war against peaceful praise. Voices of the Nation is an ecumenical group that has used city property since 2006 for their annual Peaceful Praise and Worship concert. But now, Toronto is refusing to grant VOTN a permit for next year's music festival because, according to unelected city bureaucrats, the group is guilty of proselytizing. So, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is threatening the city of Toronto with legal action. Joining us now is the man who says that the city's censorship is illegal and a blatant assault on our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. President of the JCCF, John Carpay. John, thanks so much for being here. This is a story that I know Rebel Nation has been following very closely. They care about it, and they want to know where it's going to go. My question is, what changed from the past handful of years to now?
In terms of the performance, very little has changed. Last year, in 2015, one of the Young Dundas Square staff objected to a Christian song called Days of Elijah, and there's a refrain in there that says, "There's no God like Jehovah," and the staff person approached the event organizer, Paresh Ruparelia, and said, well, can you tone it down? Because those lyrics were, quote, proselytizing. And so the organizer for Voices of the Nations, he said, well, I can't really change the lyrics of a song that's being sung on stage right now. And it's a song that they had sung in previous years. And so he said, well, I can't control what's going on stage, meaning that he couldn't force to change the lyrics of a song. And then the Young Dundas Square said, oh, well, you're saying you can't control what's going on stage. You're proselytizing. You're not allowed in 2016.
Now, for folks at home, proselytizing refers to this act of like converting someone. When you say, there's no God like Jehovah, praise the Lord. Like there's no forced conversion that's going on there. It's just praise and worship. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You are the legal expert. We have rights in this country, freedoms, specifically freedom of religion, of conscience, of expression. Don't you think it's most fitting if we can interpret the maximum amount of freedom into that, which would include saying words like Jesus and Jehovah on our taxpayer-funded city square?
Well, the city's policy, I think, runs afoul of the Charter freedom of religion and freedom of expression. The Supreme Court of Canada has been very clear on this, that freedom of religion includes the right to teach and disseminate and manifest and proclaim your religious beliefs. So the city says no proselytizing, but that's difficult. It's subjective, because anytime that you express your opinion on something, religious or political, if you express your opinion, somebody could say, well, you're trying to convince other people that you're right. To which you could say, well, duh. I mean, of course you're trying, when you're expressing your opinion, you're trying to say that's the right
what happens
opinion.
in a free society. We have these sorts of discussions and we try to convince each other, and there's a marketplace of ideas, and frankly, the crappier ideas lose and the better ones win. But we're all involved in this. That's part of a free society and always has been. John, I'll tell you what I think has changed. I think that there has been a growing hostility towards specifically Christians. I'm down at Yonge Square all the time. It's sort of like our Times Square in this city. I see Muslims preaching, I see Muslim texts out there, and frankly, I think that if this had happened to a Muslim group, we would hear our Mayor John Tory condemning it much more strongly than he has this, and actually calling for its reversal. Do you think it is fair for me to say, and here I'm thinking about the audacity of law societies against Trinity Western University, the extremism of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to bar pro-lifers from his party, do you think it's fair for me to say that there is a disturbing trend of treating Christians as second-class citizens in this country?
Yes, I unfortunately have to agree with the facts seem to suggest that, and it's something that I'm not keen to jump on because I don't want to be paranoid and I don't want to see monsters under the bed, so to speak. But the facts seem to bear that out. That I'm not so sure if there was a Muslim group that was proselytizing that they would be told to tone it down, or that they would be told that they couldn't come back next year. So there is seems to be a difference there.
Okay, where do we go from here? Let's say that the hearings don't work out in your favor. How far are you willing to go?
Well, ultimately, we'll take this to court if necessary. If Voices of the Nations wants to pursue legal action, we will be there for them. We've got 3 lawyers on staff, myself included, so we're able to provide a team to defend the charter freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. So right now, at this stage, it's the management board, which will hopefully just overturn a bad decision made by the staff, and we'll be done. If the management board refuses to overturn the decision, then we'll have to see whether there's another level of appeal within the city, and ultimately we'll have to take this to court, because this, the decision against Voices of the Nation, as well as the policy against proselytizing, at least the way it's being interpreted, is contrary to the Charter freedom of religion and freedom of expression.
Okay, and how do folks at home get involved if they so wish?
People are welcome to find out about the case at our Justice Centre website, which is www.jccf, F as in freedom, Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, so www.jccf.ca. If people want to donate in support of the case, they're welcome to make an online donation on our website, and they'll get an official tax receipt as well, because we're a registered charity.
All right, awesome. John, God bless your efforts. Thanks very much. And I know I speak on behalf of a lot of people. We couldn't keep on fighting for our God-given rights in this country without people like you. So keep up the good fight. All right, folks, stay with us. The Firing Line, your firearm story of the week. That's up next.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
On December 2nd, a California Christmas party became the scene of the single deadliest terrorist attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. Fittingly, President Obama took to the microphone from the Oval Office. But what was weird was how the president spent over half his speech talking about gun control and Islamophobia. Seriously.
Congress should act to make sure no one on a no-fly list is able to buy a gun.
So Obama wants to make the no-fly list a no-gun list. Makes sense, right? Until you consider how that'd maybe be a teeny tiny little incentivization for government to broaden the scope of the no-fly list, don't you think? Which would then bring all the civil liberties concerns Republicans suddenly care about, and groups like the ACLU, well, that they've cared about for a long time, into the forefront. But then Barack Obama went even further.
What could possibly be the argument for allowing a terrorist suspect to buy a semi-automatic weapon?
He's right. Terrorist suspects shouldn't have weapons, except according to official government documents under Obama's administration, included in the list of the types of Americans who are considered to be, quote, extremist and, quote, potential terrorists, well, they are those who talk about individual liberties, those who advocate state rights, returning veterans, anyone that suddenly acquires weapons, anyone engaged in ammunition stockpiling, anyone that is anti-abortion, those concerned with illegal immigration, people with bumper stickers that are anti-UN, general right-wing extremists, those who are anti-global, and those who are suspicious of centralized federal authority. So basically, me and just a few other people.
We also need to make it harder for people to buy powerful assault weapons, like the ones that were used in San Bernardino.
Okay, can we all just make a pact right here, right now, never to use the term assault weapon? Assault rifle is definitely a thing. Assault weapon is not. It's a made-up politician speech for scary things I don't know how to use and want to ban. Secondly of all, due to their modifications, the rifles used in the California terrorist attack were already illegal under state law. So Obama's plan is to make the illegal guns more illegal? When exactly does the criminal decide when the gun he or she intends to kill people with becomes too illegal to kill people with it? Okay, let's just skip to the parts about Islam.
Moreover, the vast majority of terrorist victims around the world are Muslim.
Okay, and that's sad, but can the crucified Christians and queers being thrown off of balconies get a shout out too, maybe?
We cannot turn against one another by letting this fight be defined as a war between America and Islam. That too is what groups like ISIL want. ISIL does not speak for Islam. They are thugs and killers, part of a cult of death. And they account for a tiny fraction of more than 1 billion Muslims around the world, including millions of patriotic Muslim Americans who reject their hateful ideology.
Am I missing something? Are there like millions of patriotic Muslim Americans writing letters to president after every terrorist attack demanding that they be reminded how awesome and peaceful their religion is? Why do we have to go through this politically correct rigmarole every time someone is killed at the hands of Islamic fundamentalists? My guess is it's because our administrations find it easier to give encouragement than admit failure.
Our closest allies, including France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, have ramped up their contributions to our military campaign, which will help us accelerate our effort to destroy ISIL. This is our strategy to destroy ISIL. It is designed and supported by our military commanders and counterterrorism experts, together with 65 countries that have joined an American-led coalition.
America's closest allies and 65 other nations. I'm not sure what the threshold is before we can start calling this World War III, but the point stands. It's been over a year since the air campaign started, and while many key targets have indeed been hit, ISIS is bigger, richer, and carrying out more significant attacks on Western soil as time goes on. Rather than training and arming Iraqi and Syrian forces on the ground, the same groups, by the way, that handed all over to ISIS in the first place, perhaps those resources would be better spent training and equipping people at home. People like the 300 men and women in blue who rushed onto the streets and were ultimately responsible for taking out the San Bernardino terrorists. But that would require the realization that, unlike the protracted hell that unfolded in Paris last month, the bad guys' carnage will only be limited by the good guys' right to carry. This week's quote of honor comes from American economist, social theorist, political philosopher, and author Thomas Sowell. He writes, "I've never understood why it is greed to want to keep the money you have earned, but not greed to want to take someone else's money." Oh, from your lips to the electorate's ears, brothers. All right, folks, before I let you go, I want to give you a few different ways to contact me. Tell me how much you loved or hated the show, the set, or some of the things that we talked about here. Email me at faith@therebel.media, or you can shoot me a tweet at faithgoldy is the handle. Thank you so very much for joining us for our very first episode of On the Hunt here with me. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we love putting it together for you. In the meantime, until next week, God bless. We got your six.